And it could be that sending an electric current down into the soil triggers some type of activity. What's up, Lazy Dog fam? Hope all y'all out there are having a fantastic day. On today's video, I'm going to talk about something that a lot of people have asked me to talk about, but that I didn't really want to talk about because I think it's just absolutely silly. But anyways, here we go. Let's talk about electroculture. So lately, this idea of electroculture and gardening seems to be all the rage on YouTube and other social media outlets. And if you haven't seen this or heard of this so far, basically what people are doing or claiming is that if you stick a copper wire in the ground beside one of your garden plants and wrap it around a post, create like a little antenna with it, that it's going to make your plants grow better than ever. Now, I'm not going to do a side-by-side experiment on electroculture because I can't find any good scientific information out there that justifies such an experiment. For an experiment to be justified, it's got to be based on some sound scientific principles and observations. I can't find anything that says what's really happening when we put an electric current into the soil that supposedly is making these plants grow better. So to give you kind of an example of that, for my master's thesis, I studied habitat relationships between horseshoe crabs and small intertidal fish. So what we observed was that horseshoe crabs create these little depressions in the intertidal zone, and when the tide goes out, water stays in these little holes, and these small little intertidal fish use them as microhabitats. So we made a sound observation there, and then we did some experiments to try to establish a correlation there. I couldn't go to my graduate advisor and say, hey, I want to do an experiment on the predator-prey relationship between horseshoe crabs and alligators. Alligators don't eat horseshoe crabs. Horseshoe crabs don't eat alligators. There's no good scientific principles behind that experiment, no good observations behind that experiment. So you see the point I'm making here. We got to have some good observations and principles behind something before we just start going after some abstract idea. So there's very little scientific evidence out there to support this idea of electroculture in agriculture. However, there's a lot of anecdotal stuff floating around out there. You'll see people saying, have you ever noticed how plants look better after a thunderstorm? Well, it's probably because it just rained a lot. Or have you ever noticed how plants growing along a power line look better than those growing off the power line? Maybe you've noticed that, but I haven't ever noticed that. Now, what we do know is that there are positive and negative ions in our soil. So we've got positive ions like calcium, sodium, potassium, and we've got negative ions like chloride. And it could be that sending an electric current down into the soil triggers some type of activity with these ions. That would make sense. But what type of activity does it trigger? And do we have to have these ions in certain concentrations for that activity to happen? There's a lot of unknowns out here. They're just kind of being guessed at. Now, if you do an online search about the validity of electroculture in agriculture, it seems like most of the front page Google results there have been flooded by electroculture proponents, and it's really hard to separate the bull from the real. So let me give you an example of some of the bull that's out there. So this came from a website called cultivateelevate.com. So on their website, they say electroculture is the ancient practice of increasing yields utilizing certain materials to harvest the Earth's atmospheric energy. This energy is always present and all around us, also known as chi, prana, life force, and ether. Now, if Sir Isaac Newton were still around and he read that, he'd probably have a heart attack. Now, I'm no physicist. My background is in biology, but I have taken quite a few physics classes over the years, and I don't ever remember us using any energy formulas that involved chi, prana, life force, or ether. So these are just abstract terms somebody made up, things that are not quantifiable that they're trying to use to justify electroculture. But it gets even better than that on this Cultivate Elevate site. They go on to say, when using electroculture, there is no need for the use of pesticides, manure, or fertilizers. This is primarily why this information was suppressed. All you need is the sun, the clouds, the rain, the nitrogen in the air, and the ability to harvest atmospheric energy. And when adding these atmospheric antennas to your garden, soil, or farm, they will amplify your yields, combat frost and excessive heat, reduce irrigation, reduce pests, and increase the magnetism of your soil, leading to more nutrients in the long run. Man, that just sounds like it's a wonderful thing to do in your garden. You're not going to have to do anything. You just put a plant in the ground, put a copper wire beside it, and leave it alone, and you're just going to have bountiful harvest, right? Now, if we scroll down a little further on that same page, the author then starts to contradict himself a little bit. So he tries to answer the question, does electroculture work on indoor plants or potted plants? And he says, yes, electroculture works wonderfully on indoor plants. A simple chopstick can be used to create your indoor antenna. Well, wait a second here, okay? You just told us that this whole process works by harnessing all this atmospheric energy outside, but yet indoors, we're still getting all that chi and life force and prana. Doesn't really make sense, does it? So I dug around a little bit more on this website trying to find an explanation as to how this copper wire is going to supply plants all the nutrients they need. Now, we know there are nitrogen fixing plants out there that can take atmospheric nitrogen and convert it into the soil. But how's a copper wire going to be able to do that? And even if we believe his assertion that it's getting nitrogen from the atmosphere, what about phosphorus and potassium? What about all the other nutrients a plant needs? We can't just make something out of nothing with a copper wire. And so it can be pretty hard to find some good objective information about electroculture. I found this one article on a website called phys.org. Seems like a pretty legit website, talking about some studies being done in China on electroculture. Now over there, they're using a much more complex setup than just sticking a copper rod in the ground and wrapping it around a pole. So this article here says a team of researchers affiliated with multiple institutions in China reports that electroculture can increase agricultural yields. The idea is to apply an electric current to growing plants. Doing so, for some unknown reason, may increase yields. Multiple studies have tested the idea, but thus far, all of them have been tainted by claims of methodological flaws. The researchers claim their results prove that electroculture works as theorized, though they had no explanation as to why. So in that study, they say it works, but they don't really know why it works, how it works. They just think it works. Now let's go to a little better study that I found that was published in the Materials of Science and Engineering. And in this study, they studied the effect of electroculture on garlic. So in this study, they had three groups of garlic. They had garlic getting no electricity, garlic getting 6 volt, and garlic getting 12 volt. And I'll throw this figure from their results up on the screen here. What they actually found was that the control group, the garlic receiving no electricity, outgrew the 6 volt and the 12 volt treatment. So that's pretty obvious right there. Now, one thing they did state was that for the 6 volt and 12 volt treatments, they did notice a little jump in the growth of those when they would give them the shock, but it would then go back down. So it was doing something to those plants, but it wasn't promoting faster growth compared to the one that was getting no electrical treatment. And then lastly, I found this short YouTube video, real simple experiment this guy did. He's got an A pot, B pot, C pot, put some cucumber seeds in it, doesn't do anything to one of the pots, and then sends an electrical current into the other 2 pots. And what he found was the one that didn't have any electricity going to it germinated faster and grew faster than the other 2. So if you look online, you can find a good bit of anecdotal information that says electroculture works. And if you dig around a little deeper, you can find a little more solid information that says, hold on just a second, we're not quite so sure about that. Now, it seems to me that a lot of this electroculture stuff is being picked up by the conspiracy crowd who believes that this technique that is just so great was being suppressed or is being suppressed by big ag, big pesticide, big fertilizer companies that don't want you to know about electroculture, because if you know about it, you're going to stop buying their fertilizer or their pesticides. I'm not buying that, but if you're a big conspiracy person, you probably are. So believe it if you want to believe it. I'm not buying it. I'm not going to do an experiment on it. I'm not going to spend any more time on it. But if you're going to believe it and you're going to promote it and you're going to advocate electroculture as this great gardening technique, do your research first. Read articles for electroculture and read articles against electroculture. Don't just read articles that are just confirming what you already believe. Read articles with an opposing opinion. That way you can make an educated decision. So don't try to make things more complicated than they are. Just understand the basic principles of gardening and you can be successful. Understand plants need water, plants need nutrients, and unless you've got some magical unicorn soil, you're probably going to have to add some fertilizer because there's not enough in that soil to feed those plants. You know why this sweet corn behind me here is green? Because we let our chickens poop all over this plot and then we side dressed them with some nitrogen fertilizer. There's no magic thing to make this corn green. We just have to feed it. Do you know why those onions are so big? Because we let our chickens poop all over this plot and then we side dressed them with some nitrogen fertilizer. It's not rocket science. It's not complicated. Don't make it complicated. So I hope you enjoyed the video today. Be sure to check out our affiliate links in the description below and go check out our website, lazydogfarm.com. And if you want to see how to grow big onions without doing any crazy copper wire antennas in your garden, check out this video right here. We give step-by-step instructions and details on how to grow big onions in your backyard garden without any magical tricks. So check that out. We'll see you next time right here at Lazy Dog Farm.